So today we'll be talking about copyright and Creative Commons, how they work together to make an open access possible. I'm going to pass it along to Isabel. About halfway through our presentation today, I'm going to put a link in the chat to a quick 2-minute survey. We just always like to know how we're doing with our workshops and what kind of workshops we can offer in the future. So I'll put that in there. And then towards the end of the workshop, if you wouldn't mind filling it out, we would really appreciate it. So thank you all for attending. And Isabel, passing it along to you.
Thank you, Marlena. So as Marlena said, I'm Isabel Soto Luna. I'm the business librarian here at UNO Libraries. First, let me tell you, Craig Finley, our OER and STEM librarian, was supposed to join us today, but he's had an emergency. So I'm taking over and I'm going to be doing this all by my lonesome. But as a business librarian, copyright does come into play quite a bit. And, you know, as librarians overall, we do get a lot of questions about copyright, open educational resources, open access. And we have found that a lot of people have, you know, sort of these myths out there about what Creative Commons is and what copyright is. So we're going to be discussing quite a few of those things. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you now. All right, everybody should have that beginning of the presentation up there. So, you know, as Marlena said, we're going to be looking at how copyright and Creative Commons, how they work together to make open education possible and make it easier on your students. So, why is this not going? There we are. Okay. So first off, copyright, Creative Commons, and DEAI, diversity, equity, access, and inclusivity. Why is this important? Why are we starting off with stressing this? There have been many studies that have found that students, the cost of textbooks really affects them. Students will report skipping meals, forgoing trips home, registering for fewer classes. A lot of them won't even get the textbook and try to figure out if they can borrow it from friends or if they can find pirated copies of the internet, you know, which really affects their grades in class, you know, and it really affects retention rates as well as did not finish rates. However, it has been found that those classes that use open access materials that not only have retention rates improved, but grades have improved. And of course, the majority of the students being affected by all of this are students who are from underrepresented groups. And so, you know, what we are looking at having, you know, a lot of first generation students and having a very diverse campus. So we want to be sure that what we are offering our students are things that they're going to be able to afford and that they're going to be successful in. So today we are going to be looking at, you know, copyright basics. What is copyright? How does it work? Creative Commons is what we're going to spend a little bit more time on, which is, you know, what the components are, what the licenses are, and how those licenses work. And we are going to touch on fair use because fair use is a huge part of copyright, especially in higher education or K through 12 education, really. And, you know, part of Creative Commons as well. So now, those of you in here right now, without consulting Google, without taking a look at Google, I want you to take a minute or two and try to come up with a description of what it is that you think Creative Commons is. So if you had to explain it to somebody with what you know right now, what is Creative Commons to you? You can put something in the chat or you can put something, or you can just go ahead and speak up. So if, you know, just off the top of your head, what do you think Creative Commons is?
Well, let me start. I'm just Chuck Nicholson. Well, Creative Commons, I think it has multiple levels of fair use, or whether it be without, you know, like a picture that's in a library that anybody can use, or something where you have to acknowledge that it's coming from, say, like a cartoon from XKCD, or sometimes you have to actually do even more to use that material.
Okay, sort of. Does anybody else have an idea?
I'm going to add that it helps. Okay, Creative Commons tells us, tells the audience how others can use that piece of information or how it can be shared to others.
Okay, yes, that is exactly what Creative Commons does. So copyright, broadly, copyright gives you the exclusive right when you create something, you're intellectual property. It gives you the exclusive right to take that intellectual property and you can use, copy, modify, publish, and distribute it. Okay. Creative Commons is not an exception to copyright. What it is as a creator, you can choose which rights you are giving automatic permission for people to, in which ways you want people to use your work. That is what Creative Commons does. So instead of having everybody, continuously asking you for permission to use your work or to make a derivative of your work or to modify it, you're granting that permission ahead of time, is what you're doing with a Creative Commons license. So it doesn't take away your copyright. It doesn't, it's not an exception. You still own your intellectual property. You are still able to profit from your intellectual property. None of that changes. You're just simply granting those permissions. So with the basics of copyright, as we said earlier, it protects your work from other people reproducing, adapting, publishing, distributing, or performing your work. So copyright came about as a result of people trying to figure out a way to maintain both utilitarian and author's rights. So utilitarian rights, they're meant to motivate the creation of new works, okay, by ensuring that the creator can benefit from their work. While author's rights are meant to protect and recognize the relationship by a creator and their intellectual property. Now, intellectual property is basically any work that you have developed and placed in a fixed format. And that's the key. You have to place it in a fixed format. It cannot just be an idea that you had, okay? It has to be placed in a fixed format. So for example, this presentation here, Marlene is recording it. I'm giving this presentation. This is my copyright. This is my presentation. It is being placed in a fixed format. Therefore, I own the copyright to it. Okay. Now, most of my work is Creative Commons anyway, but that's basically what it means. If you have written it down, if you have performed it, if you have recorded it, anything that gets put down in a fixed format, that is what copyright protects. Now, public domain refers to usually it's works where the copyright has expired, or for various reasons, it was never afforded copyright protections. For example, recipes. Recipes are considered an idea, not really intellectual property, so recipes are not given copyright. There are times in which, as a creator, you can put things in the public domain, but pretty much you own copyright until something changes or until it expires. And typically, you will have copyright until you die, plus 70 years is how long that lasts. Now, what are some of the things that are eligible for copyright? As I said earlier, recipes are not. However, literary works, musical works, dramatic works, choreographies. That's usually one that is surprising to people, is that if you create a choreography, it is yours. You now own the copyright to it. Pictorial works, motion pictures, sound recordings, architectural works, all of those things are copyrightable. Now, Creative Commons, as mentioned earlier, it allows you to share your work and decide the limitations of how you want people to use that work. So there's three parts to Creative Commons. Number one is the licenses that you can place on your work. Then there is the movement. It is basically a movement towards this open access, open educational resources that promote not just the access to information, but also the creation of new works, new information. And of course, there's the organization. There is a Creative Commons organization, which seeks to empower all entities to share their knowledge and information with the public. This was a result of, this was started by Lawrence Lessig, who was actually Eric Eldred's lawyer in a copyright case. And the challenge was around what they call the Mickey Mouse law, okay? Because Mickey Mouse, many of you know this, may or may not know this, Mickey Mouse is about to once again go into the public domain. The copyright for Mickey Mouse, the original Mickey Mouse, like the Steamboat Willie Mickey Mouse, is about to go into the public domain yet again in 2024, I believe. However, this was supposed to happen years ago. And Disney lobbied Congress to expand that copyright for corporations. So corporations have longer copyright on their creations than individuals do. And Eric Eldred said, well, that is not in the spirit of what copyright was meant to do. Copyright was meant to encourage people to create more works. So this is not okay. This is not in the spirit of copyright. That lawsuit was lost. We don't know what's going to happen with Disney. All of us who follow copyright, cases and stuff, which I find absolutely fascinating. So does Craig. We can speak about hours on it. Are kind of wondering what Disney's going to do in this next couple of years to stop this from happening again. And considering that we're looking at a very different atmosphere right now in terms of information and, people's rights, we'll see what happens, and maybe extend it again. It might not be. But that was this Creative Commons was the result of that lawsuit, because people went, you know what? We need to figure out a way in which people can share their work and decide what limitations they want to give people, what rights they want to keep, and what rights they want people to have. So that's how Creative Commons came about. Now, Creative Commons, it makes education possible because it allows educators to know exactly how it is that those materials can be used. Specific licenses maintain certain rights. As we all know, we're all educators. If you don't have that CC license on there, you are always kind of wondering, I'm sure at one point or another, you have reached out to somebody and said, hey, I kind of want to do this with these materials in my classroom, but I'm not sure if that's allowed. Well, a Creative Commons license defines for you exactly what is and is not allowed in your classroom. And, yes, education falls under fair use, but even under fair use, there's certain things you're allowed to do in a classroom and certain things that you are still not allowed to do. So, it can be quite tricky to navigate. A Creative Commons license makes that a lot easier for you. So what is a Creative Commons license? Creative Commons license, it has 3 layers. We're not going to get into these layers too much because, you don't need to know that. The lawyers can take care of that part. But one is a machine readable layer. That is the layer that, online on the internet allows you to search and find Creative Commons items. The human layer, which is the part that allows us to read it and see it and understand it. And then there is the legal layer, the lawyer layer, the enforceable part that makes this a legal license that works within copyright. So there's just the 3 parts of the license. But here we are to the actual components of what makes a Creative Commons license. So there are 6 licenses, and they are made up of 4 features, 4 components. The first component, and it is part of every single license of all 6 of them, is the by. CC by. That gives you attribution. Anytime somebody uses your work, they must give you attribution. They must attribute your work to you. They must say, we derived this from here, or this is originally from this person. That is a component that is part of all of them. The rest of these are a mix and match, share alike. This component indicates that anyone who does use your work must share it under the same terms. And we'll get into that here in a little bit. So the non-derivative component means that your work can't be modified. It can be copied, displayed, it can be performed, but it cannot be modified. It cannot be changed. And the non-commercial component indicates that other people cannot monetize your work when using it for their own projects. Okay, so there's always a little bit of confusion between the share alike and the non-commercial, because people would think, okay, well, if you have to share it alike, wouldn't that mean you can't monetize it? Not necessarily. So share alike applies even if only a portion of the work is used. So even if a small portion of the work is used, that portion of the work, if the entire work has a different license, there has to be a caveat in there saying this portion of the work is licensed under this same license that the original author shared it. Share alike can get a little complicated to use. Most people stay away from share alike unless they're going to share the entire thing or make a derivative of the entire thing. But with share alike, the work can fall under fair use. So if I were writing a research paper that was going to be published and I was going to get paid to publish it, and it was going to go under, let's say, Pearson, I can still cite your work. I can still use a quote and cite your work because the work that I'm doing is for education and I am citing your work under that. So in many cases, it will still fall under fair use. The non-commercial, what that does is it means that the work itself cannot be monetized. So what matters here is the intent, not who's using it. It is the intent. This one can get a little murky with the example that I just gave, because usually with Pearson, you're going to get paid something, right? You're going to get something out of publishing that, but they're asking you not to commercialize it. So, you know, that is where fair use is going to, the lines are going to be sort of blurred. And that is one that I would say, talk to a lawyer if you're going to be monetizing something. The example that I do like to use with non-commercial is this. Let's say that Microsoft is creating a PSA about the community work that they do. And they are using Creative Commons pictures that they found, and they're giving full attribution like they should. And they're just simply using those pictures to create PSAs and ads that promote their community work, promote their charity, promote the stuff that they help communities with. That falls under non-commercial. Doesn't matter that technically speaking, Microsoft is a for-profit company. That falls under non-commercial because they are not using those images to sell something. They are not monetizing those images. However, if a nonprofit takes a work that has a non-commercial license on it and decides to put it on t-shirts and sell those t-shirts as a fundraiser, it does not matter that they are a nonprofit. They are breaking that non-commercial clause because they are monetizing the image. So does that make sense to everyone in terms of the difference of those two? Okay, if you have questions, please feel free to speak up.
Those examples helped a lot. Thank you. I really, yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Thank you.
So we're going to get into the specific licenses and what they look like. So as I said, the buy license. This is the most permissive of them all. What you are saying is you can do whatever you want to do with this work. You just have to attribute it back to me. You just have to give me credit for the original work. Simplest of the licenses, the easiest to use, and there's actually a lot of there are a lot of works out there under this license. Now, the second one. Now we're going here from most permissive to the most to the least permissive. So this is attribution share alike. As I said, if you're going to use the work, you must create a license that shares that work under the same type of licenses as the original. Now, attribution, no derivatives. So there are many people out there for whom this no derivatives assignation isn't really in the open access or open educational resources spirit, because the no derivatives means that you can share this work, you can copy it, you can do whatever you need to do with it, but you cannot change it, not in any way, shape, or form. Whereas open access and open educational resources are really about being able to take a work and adapting it to the needs of your particular students or your particular community. However, there are several reasons why somebody may not want their work not changed. For example, I am currently doing for our students, a virtual Dia de los Muertos altar. Okay. This is going to go into our digital commons at UNO. It is going to be preserved, and it is going in there as with a no derivative license. Why? Because this is the work of students who are honoring their loved ones. So while you can take the idea of a virtual altar and do one for yourself with your students, I do not want you taking those specific slides and altering them to fit what you want, because this is about our students and their loved ones and how they're honoring them. So there's various reasons for why you might want to use this attribution no derivative license. And then there's the attribution non-commercial, self-explanatory, right? You have to attribute the work back to me. You have to give me credit for my work, and you cannot monetize my work. Only I get to do that. I'm the only one who gets to monetize my work. Even if you have this on your work, you get to monetize it. It's your work. You can do whatever you want with it. That just means other people can't monetize it. Non-commercial, share alike. Okay. For a lot of people, like I said, this would seem obvious, but there are times in which you may be able to commercialize something, even if you are sharing it alike, because share alike does fall under fair use, and there are times in which share alike might not cover everything. Therefore, both of these covers you completely for ensuring that your work doesn't get monetized, and that it is being shared alike with the community. And the least permissive of the licenses is attribution, non-commercial, no derivatives. People can share your work, they can copy it, but they cannot change it and they cannot commercialize it. Now, there are people who question, why isn't there one with all four of the components? All four components of the licenses in there. Because if you have a no derivatives, you're already not allowed to change that work. And so you're already sharing it alike. There's no reason to put another license on it, because you're already telling people you can't create something new from this. Therefore, I own it forever. And therefore, just because I'm not asking you to license it or pay me to copy it and share it, that doesn't mean I'm allowing you to make money off of it. And that doesn't mean I'm allowing you to create a new work from it. So you don't need at that point the share alike license. So any questions about the licenses at this point?
Isabel, I have a question.
Of course.
There was, I've seen it sometimes represented as like CC BY-NC 2.5, and I'm not quite sure what the 2.5 means when I see it.
That is the version of the license from when it was created.
Okay.
So right now we're at version 4.0. So as laws change and copyright gets challenged, that legal layer of the copyright of the license that I mentioned, we are at version 4.0 at this point. So it just means it's an older license.
Okay. But is it still valid?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yes. Creative Commons license, even if the license is older, it is absolutely still valid.
Thank you.
So here's some examples of how you're going to see these out there in the wild, if you will. So these are textbooks that are licensed under these various licenses. So you have the Anatomy and Physiology. It's under a Creative Commons license, Attribution License 4.0, the CC BY license. And this is what you were talking about, Charles. This one is 4.0. That is the level of license that we have going right now. Some will be a little bit older. We have a Creative Commons, non-commercial, share alike, and then we have a attribution, share alike, right? So they're all under different licenses, and it really all depends on what it is that you're trying to achieve. A lot of textbooks like this Anatomy and Physiology are going to be under a CC BY license, because a lot of science textbooks, people want others to be able to adapt these textbooks for their communities and for their students. I have heard of astrophysics textbooks where, the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere do not look alike. And so they will take that open access astrophysics textbook that was written in the Northern Hemisphere and adapt it to a Southern Hemisphere when it comes to all of the constellations and the stars and all of that stuff, because they're different. And so it's been adapted in that way. So that's really the goal of all of these licenses. Now, in the past, I'm sure, you know, you've tried to read copyright agreements, haven't we all? And we all get this look on our face. I get this look on my face. Like, oh my God, like what is this about, right? Or this. Like, there have been times when I'm like, you know what? I don't know. I usually follow that up with let's find out. But it's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know how this is going to turn out. Because while I do know about copyright and I'm giving you all of this information, I am not a lawyer. So keep that in mind. And of course, you know, there's also this one, and who doesn't get this face, right? So Creative Commons is designed just to address this problem. Exactly. So did you notice anything about any of those images at all? I left them up for a little bit. Did you notice anything about these images at all as I was going through them?
Some had Creative Commons markings on.
That's right. Exactly. So these first two images here, these are actually public access. They were painted by Samuel Johnson way back in 1775 and 1772. Copyright has long expired. These images from public domain, you can use any way you wish. You don't have to give attribution. And Wikipedia, these Craig pulled them from Wikipedia. And Wikipedia actually only uses either Creative Commons or public domain images for this exact reason, because imagine if they had to run around looking for images and then asking for copyright permissions, right? But this is public domain. Now, I will say, as a librarian, even if you don't have to give attribution, it's just the right thing to do. Give attribution. Just do it. You don't have to with public domain stuff, but, you know, do the right thing, right? Be nice about it. Now, the second image, as Charles said, yes, it has a license from Pixabay. This one is from Pixabay. They have their own version of Creative Commons licensing, but it tells you right here, free for commercial use and no attribution required. Okay, so we didn't have to say who this image was from. And you can do that. You can decide, you know what? I'm just going to throw stuff out there and I don't want attribution. That's okay. And then this one, see, you can see it in the first pictures there. This was the search for confused. And these are all of the pictures that came up. The puppy's really cute. We thought about using it, but you know, maybe people would have just gone for the puppy face and not quite gotten the confused. But as you can see, it has a Creative Commons license. And as you can see, you can filter a lot of results in a lot of places by the type of license that you're looking for. So this is usually, when you click on those links, what it looks like. It explains to you, when we're talking about that human readable and machine readable, this explains to you what the license does, what you are free to do with a specific license. This is the one from that confused picture. And what it is telling you, you must do. You must give attribution and you must share a link. And you have no additional restrictions. So this brings us to fair use, which we kind of consider sort of cousin of Creative Commons. So, you know, some of you, the way you described Creative Commons was a little bit like fair use, and people tend to do that quite a bit. You may have thought of it in the same way that, you know, copyright does not apply under Creative Commons. Well, now we know that that's not the case. However, that is the case when it comes to fair use, sort of. It is a very vital, important part of copyright when it comes to educators. That fair use really is sort of our bread and butter for a lot of the research that we do, the scholarship that we do, a lot of things that we do within the classroom, not just for higher education, but also for K through 12. So the creators of copyright basically realized that you can't restrict use of all materials. That can get problematic, right? How can critics write about the work? If you're going to write about a movie and be like, you know, this movie sucked, how are you going to do that? Or this movie was great. How are you going to do that if you can't write about the movie? If you can't use a quote from the movie, if you can't, you can't do that. The same thing with, work. If you're going to review a book, if you're going to, do anything, how are you going to do that? So what about educational needs? What about people with disabilities? You know, what about somebody who isn't able to, you know, what about somebody who's blind that needs a Braille book and, you know, for whatever reason, the author and the publishers decided not to publish a Braille book. So somebody else creates that for that person with a disability. And does that mean that, you know, now that person has to pay a lot of money for copyright infringement? Like, that's not cool, right? So therefore, fair use was created. Now, to determine fair use, there was a 4-factor test created. The first factor is the purpose. Why are you creating this work? Why are you making these changes? Why are you making a copy? Why are you creating the change? What is the purpose of this? Is it for a commercial nature? Is it for nonprofit purposes? Is it for educational purposes? What is the purpose of the work? Number 2 is the nature of the copyrighted work. So what was the nature of the original work? Was it written? Was it a video? Was it, you know, what was the nature of it? The amount. What amount of the original work was used? How much of the work was used in order to create this new thing? Okay. And number 4, the market. What effect will your use have on the market? Now, one of the things that it is important to remember, not all of these factors are given equal weight in every case, because it all depends on the first one and what is the purpose of the use, right? So if you're switching something from written to Braille, you're going to use the full amount of the work, right? And so in that case, okay, yeah, you've used the full amount, but the nature of the work was written and there was nothing else that existed to help people. So the purpose is going to matter more. Okay. You know, so any judge, any case that hinges on fair use is going to look at each of these 4 factors individually and not give any of them, you know, a specific amount of weight. It all depends on the case. It all depends how it's used. Now, things that generally fall under fair use are research, criticism, comments, news reporting, teaching, and scholarship. Those are the things, and I just realized, why are our comments on there like that? That is very weird. Sorry. But these are content that is categorized under fair use. So fair use in action. You know, this is something that happens in a lot of classroom settings, including higher ed. You're showing a portion of the film face-to-face in a classroom setting. And it's you're showing the equivalent of the duration of the class. So let's say the class lasts long enough to show the entire film. It's still in an educational setting. You're showing it to a classroom. You're showing it for educational purposes. Now, the interesting thing here is that this does apply to online education as well. Why? Because most of the time in an online education setting, it's not considered a public viewing because you have to actually log into the class in order to be able to take the class. It's not an open class that anybody can just log into, which is what the opposing side of this does. A student group where anybody can just show up and come watch the movie and it's open to anyone, that's no longer an educational setting. So the first one's fair use, the second one is not. Now, some other points to keep in mind between a fair use versus Creative Commons. It is easy to go beyond the boundaries of fair use and Creative Commons and end up infringing. It is very easy to do that. So you do have to be careful. Fair use means that you are using work that is still protected under exclusive copyright. One of the things many educators get wrong is that fair use gives them full permission to use the work as they please. That is not true. You cannot buy a textbook, scan the whole thing, and then share it with your students. That is copyright infringement. Many people think that falls under education fair use. It does not, because now you are affecting the sales of that book. Like I said, all 4 of them have to be are not given, depending on the situation, right? Well, now you are fully affecting the market of that book, and that does matter. As it says here, course packs are not covered by fair use due to the circumvention of the market. You can't do that. Copying 10 chapters of a 20 chapter book. Amount and sustainability, right? If you're using half the book, half a textbook, half the students buy the book. Or even better yet, create an open access textbook for yourself. Then you don't have to worry about, infringing copyright. Now, Creative Commons does allow creators to surrender some of those exclusive rights, which is what open access is. And it lets users know they don't have to seek permission. The permission's already given by the license that was done. And then I got to tell you about this meme, because this is one of Craig's favorite memes, the you wouldn't download a bear. Okay. So we all remember, when it was VHS and, the FBI warning, you wouldn't steal a bear, you wouldn't, all that at the beginning. Well, would you download a bear, right? And that's what you're doing. If you're infringing copyright, you are gaining yourself a whole lot of trouble. You don't want to do that. You don't want to infringe copyright. It's just not the right thing to do. And if you ever have a question, you can reach out to me. You can reach out to Craig, and we will be happy to help you out in any way that we can. Now, here's a little sort of infographic, if you will, of the things to think about when you're looking at a work. So, can I use it? First, look at the copyright status. What is the copyright status? Is it under Creative Commons? All right, go ahead and use it under the bounds of the license. Respect the bounds of the license, but you can go ahead and use it. Is the work under copyright? Okay, then you've got 2 questions, two things that you got to look at. Would the use that you are, with the way that you are using this work, would it fall under fair use? Keep that 4-factor test in your mind. Would it pass those 4 factors? If not, get permission. Reach out to the creator. And of course, there's the public domain. You can use those reasonably. Best practice is still to credit the creator, even though you don't have to. But these are the things to think about when you're looking at a work, and if you can use it in your classroom or in your own works or not. Now, some of the resources for you to understand Creative Commons license, you can go to creativecommons.org/licenses. It describes the layers of the license. It gives you some of the legal language. It has more descriptions about what it allows. And then, of course, there's the CC license creator, also under creativecommons.org/choose. And there you can choose the license that is right for you and for your works. So you can start just, putting that license on your works, putting your work out there. And it does generate what's called an embeddable license. That's why you see the links, because it is a license that is going to encompass everything that you need in order for that to work. So I actually, even though I know what my licenses are, I still go on there and use that because it has all of the legal information and all of the coding in it that needs to be done. Something else to think about. Both Craig and I went through the certificate program from the Creative Commons organization. So Craig and I are both certified under Creative Commons for the usage of Creative Commons licenses. Again, that doesn't make us lawyers, but it does make us very knowledgeable about Creative Commons licensing. And it is an intensive 10-week program. It really gets into the nuts and bolts of the licenses. And if you're interested in this sort of thing, we really do recommend the program. It is a great certificate course. And then, of course, Craig loves this book. I do too, after I got it. Copyright Law for Librarians and Educators. So this book really sort of lays out copyright in a sort of non-legal and yet very accurate way. So it's really easy to understand, really easy to read, but it doesn't skip on the details. It really gives you the information that you need. But this dude is excellent at giving you the information in a way that is actually interesting and accurate and makes you want to keep reading. And it has really great examples in there. So if you want to look a little bit further, this is a great book to have. And when I bought it from the ALA, American Library Association store. They sell this book. And At the time that I bought it, it was at 50% off. So you may want to check it out if you want to do that. So we are at the end of our presentation. What questions do you all have? And I'm going to stop my share just because I like talking to people. I feel like it's better.
Isabel, I have a question on the
Yes.
libraries books that you have that are in electronic version that some of us use for our classes.
Uh-huh.
How are they affected by all Creative Commons, public domain, all that sort of thing? Is it you already have a license so we can use them?
You mean the ebooks that we have in the library?
Right.
Yes. So those books are licensed we actually pay for the license for students to be able to use them.
Okay.
So you can share those links and you can share those books with your students.
Okay. Good.
Yes, you are definitely allowed to do that because we are already paying for that through the library. So any ebooks that we have within the library works just like with any other library. I mean, we are paying for the license so that you can borrow it. So, and as long as you are sharing that with students,
right.
You'll be able to use that.
So follow up to that, do y'all keep track of what books are being actively used by any of the courses? Because I assume our licenses are not in perpetuity. I mean, they could go away, correct?
So what winds up happening is, number one, we don't keep textbooks. So if you're using an ebook as a textbook, we wouldn't know that.
Okay.
Okay. But most of the time when we help you guys figure out, because that's assuming you used one of us, which we do, which does happen. When we do that, we're helping you, we've done it, but we're not necessarily keeping track of what you're using because that's not, you might change it. And there's a lot of classes, like for example, I'm the only liaison to the College of Business Administration. I can't keep up with all of those classes,
Once a year I check with Craig, see if it looks.
Yeah, usually what winds up happening in those situations, is, somebody goes in and goes, oh, hey, this isn't working for whatever reason, can you, can you check and see? Oh, well, the book, we no longer have access to. Now, most of the time, once we buy the license, all we have to do is continue following the license, which means one person can use it at a time or 30 people can use it at a time. It is very rare for us to lose that license.
Okay.
Very rare. But what does happen sometimes is the link changes. The link can change. So that's something to think about when doing that. But yeah, most of the time with our stuff in the library, you're not going to have that issue. Most of the time it's because something just, sort of changed in there and you just need it to, update the link.
Related to that, do you get metrics at all on how much books like that are used?
Yes.
So you would be able to tell then, for instance, if you were considering not renewing the license, which I know that may not happen, be able to see if it hadn't been used in 5 years or something like that.
Yeah, so usually with ebooks, that's called weeding. Usually with ebooks, we don't do weeding because usually, they're not taking up space. They're not hurting anything.
Sure.
There's no reason for us to do that with them. But with our print manuscripts, or any of our print stuff, we do have to look at that. We do take a look at that, and we do want to be cognizant of the way they're being used. And
Sure.
If they're not being used, then in that case, we will make sure that it gets removed because there's no reason to keep it.
Are those metrics shareable? So for instance, if Chuck had a book that was an ebook through you, if he were to come and ask you, can you tell me about how many different students of mine are accessing this book? Is that something you can share, or is that private?
Yes and no. So we can keep track of who is using the book. We can say this many, we have had this many uses of a book, But we can't tell who.
Great.
That is due to privacy.
Yep.
Which most libraries are going to maintain, no matter what. So, you know, that's a huge deal for us libraries, is we're not going to share it in that way. We're not going to give you the information of who.
Great.
However, we can tell you how many times it was used, and we can't guarantee that it was just your class, because remember, it's a library book. Everybody has access to it.
Yeah, that's still great to know, though, because I can know instructors sometimes, you know, there's time investment to utilize a source like that and whatnot, and actually being able to find out that, yes, it's being used versus just books from the bookstore or whatever. That's probably valuable information that people might want.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah, no, that's really good information that people do want. But yeah, we you know, we can share, you know, and you can kind of have an idea. I mean, if you have 35 students and 28 people have used the book in the last semester, you kind of know that some of your students didn't use it, especially when you consider the fact that it is a library book.
Yeah.
And you're going to have other usage from it. So, you know, it's something to think about. It is definitely something to think about for sure. So, any other questions from anybody?
Will you be sending out the recording through email?
Yes, I do believe Marlena will be doing that. And I am actually, I know Marlena put in a survey for you guys, but I am actually going to give you a survey link myself as well. I'm putting that in there right now. And this just lets us know how effective, Craig and myself, how effective this was in teaching you guys all about copyright and Creative Commons. If you could please just fill that out, and you know, it should take you less than 5 minutes. It's really not hard to do at all. But it just kind of, you know, helps us keep track of, you know, how we're doing and how this has helped you. And if there's, you know, anything you need us to, you know, cover as well, or any other topics or ideas that you want us to give any kind of workshop on.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will just follow up real quick. Thank you, first of all, Isabel, for the great presentation there. Since there was a question about the recording, I'm just going to share that all of our sessions we do post in our Keep Teaching site. So if you've been to our site here for Keep Teaching at unomaha.edu, if you go look at our fall workshops, Keep Teaching workshops, fall, you'll see all of our series. And then once it's done, we usually put a recording link right underneath the session. So this one, we will do that by the end of today or tomorrow. But I think Marlena may also email out the link to people who attended. So thanks again. I hope we see you all at another session. Isabel, thank you very much for presenting.
Thank you.
Okay.
Please don't forget to fill out those surveys, okay? Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.